Wonderful. A very warm good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining our session today, Fastening Your Seatbelt for Accelerated Growth of Tourism. My name is Nicolas Mayer. I'm PwC's Global Industry Lead for Tourism and based here. Together with my colleague Marwan Bejjani, I will be taking you through a quite interesting ride, so fasten your seatbelt. Setting the scene. We are now in year 3 after the kickoff of COVID, and who would have thought that the biggest challenge in the industry is how to prioritize the investment requirements, the investment requests, the demand for airlift, for hospitality, for experiences at the pace at which we're currently seeing it here in the region and globally. So today, with our panelists, we really want to understand how this post-COVID investment push that has come out and that has kept our executives busy across days and nights, how they're dealing with it, where they are prioritizing their investments, what part goes to bricks and mortars, what part goes to talent, what part goes to sustainability or to digital transformation, and to basically understand what has that done to their part of the industry in positive as well as perhaps in added stress levels. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. We're going to start from left to right. Hazim Al-Hazmi, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of the Saudi Tourism Authority, which for those of you that are not from the region here is Saudi Arabia's national destination marketing organization, and it is a destination management organization on steroids. They are racing, working, rolling out, promoting and deploying at a pace that I think very few of us that work in tourism would have seen over the past 20 to 30 years. Next over is Kelly Craighead. Kelly Craighead is the CEO and President of Cruise Lines International Association, which is the trade association representation and advocacy group for what I understand is about 90% of the world's cruise industry. So basically, she is quite literally the captain of the ship. And prior to that, to have an additional link to tourism, Kelly, you were the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Travel and Tourism, which is a very long title, which basically means the United States of America's Tourism Minister. And it's wonderful to have you here. Does anybody here not know Marloes Knippenberg yet? All right, a few, just in case, I'm going to introduce her again. So Marloes has 2 roles. First of all, she is the CEO of Curtin Hospitality, and as such, the driver behind what is one of the most innovative, multi-use, mixed-use concepts, operations in hospitality here in the region, but pretty much everywhere, except boring places, right? Yeah, boring established places you're not so interested in. And as a side job, she is also quickly becoming the kingdom's chief ice cream making officer with Curtin Hospitality's Nakati brand. If you haven't had it, taste it, it's awesome, which you may be going to tell us a little bit more about how that's going to launch a little bit more. And lastly, but not least, Badr Al-Herbish, who's the Executive Director of Strategy for the Tourism Development Fund, which is the fund in the kingdom, for those of you that would not have dealt with them already, that is mandated and tasked by basically investing and enabling investment into the tourism ecosystem in the regions, in the centers, in the kingdom, and to facilitate the onboarding of the foreign direct investment that is very excited, but at times needs a guide to help them to basically make the right decision at the right time in the right place. So thank you very much for some of you coming from very far, or some of you coming and staying with us. Marwan, before we kick it off, give us a context of the size of this industry so that we stop pretending that this is a small and medium enterprise entity. Give it off to you.
Thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, everyone. I thought the best way to kick off this session is to share with you some key facts about the tourism industry and the accelerated growth era we're living in. Firstly, this is an industry pre-COVID, 2019, of $10 trillion. 10% of the world's economy is related to travel and tourism. And it employs 330 million jobs across the world. 330, more than the population of the United States of America. So imagine this number. Obviously, during COVID, the sector was hit tremendously, and this 10 million shrunk to almost 5 million. But there's good news, strong signs of recovery. As you can see, you all traveled here, hotels, airlines, and the expected growth this year is to exceed 8 trillion, i.e. 80% of the pre-COVID era. And the expectation is by next year, 2023, to exceed pre-COVID numbers and build the momentum forward. So that's the facts to date. What's the projections for the future? Globally, World Travel and Trade and Tourism Council expects 5.8% growth year in, year out for the next 10 years globally. 5.8%. The global economy is growing at 2.8, double the size of the global economy. And guess what? Saudi Arabia is expected to grow at 11%. So even double the growth rate of the global economy. So this is what the tourism industry is living, and this is what we refer to as the accelerated growth that is anticipated in the next 10 years. So with that in mind, let me turn over to our panelists. You've seen the numbers, very aggressive, hyper-growth era. Maybe Badr, I'll start with you. You're living this in Saudi Arabia day in, day out as part of your TDF mandate. How are you coping with this growth? And what are you doing to prioritize investments to adapt to this growth?
Thank you very much, Marwan and Nick, for the amazing introduction. It's my pleasure to be here, and good afternoon for everyone. Thank you for the fellow panelists who shared the stage with me today. I think in Saudi Arabia, we recognize this as a major opportunity for us. And this is outlined beautifully in the National Tourism Strategy, which was launched in 2019, which set the stage for the creation of the Tourism Development Fund, the upgrade of the commission, the Tourism Commission into the ministry, and the creation of the Saudi Tourism Authority to work cohesively to channel all the efforts that's being done by the private sector into opportunities that materialize into successful investments and providing amazing tourism experiences for our visitors, whether they are local visitors from Saudi Arabia or international visitors. We are aiming to have the tourism sector as a key pillar in Saudi's economy. Our target is actually 10% of the national GDP by 2030. We aim to create 1 million jobs between now and then. Back in 2018, the tourism sector, I believe, accounted for 600,000 jobs. We're aiming to create 1 million additional jobs. And I believe we're well on our way to even double that between now and 2025, not 2030. All of that is in the aim to attract 100 million visitors between now and then. Now, the pandemic, of course, changed a lot of things, but I believe in Saudi Arabia at least, it even emphasized the opportunity even more. We capitalized on the months after the pandemic in really igniting the local tourism, and I believe my colleague Hazem will really elaborate on that further. But we as a country as citizens, recognize the power that tourism as an industry provides, not only as a leisure activity, but as a real sector and an industry within the kingdom. For TDF specifically, although we started focusing on our financial products, and we have 17 different products between debt, equity, and guarantees, but we believe that our value proposition goes well beyond that. We are here to support investors throughout the value chain in any way that they see fit, whether it's matchmaking with local investors, matchmaking with developers or operators, guiding them as they develop their feasibility study, all the way until matching them with the right product from TDF. So that's in a nutshell how we see the opportunity. It's an opportunity that's there for us to seize, and we are aiming to capitalize on it. And thank you very much.
But I think you said it really right? You are, at least in the tourism investment environment, you are the matchmaker of the nation, right?
That's one of the things that we do, absolutely. And again, we started off believing that maybe the financial products would be the real value proposition. It is definitely important, but we recognized quickly that the investors are much more sophisticated than what we had originally thought, to their credit. What they need is data, access, guidance, and financial support. So the financial support is like the icing on the cake at the very end of the life cycle of the project.
And when you look a little bit, you said it, right? So you've been able to observe this now for 2, 3, 4 years, and you're right, I was very active during COVID with domestic. Is there any change in the type of products that you're being asked to help with, or is it stayed constant?
No, we are continuously evolving. So I think, and this is led by His Excellency, our chairman, His Excellency Al-Khatib, he always encourages us to balance between kind of waiting until we have a fully articulated strategy and execution plan and hitting the ground running. Because again, it's a new sector. So we cannot wait until we analyze and assess every single aspect of our strategy. We have to pilot, test, and evolve as we go. We are capitalizing on the flexibility of the product offerings that we have in creating programs that cater for the gaps as we see them in the market. So, which allows us to really fill in the gaps as we go and create new product offerings, create new programs, retire them if needed, and adapt as we go, basically, to the needs of the investors.
Maybe to take this out of the kingdom into the global ecosystem, right? Or maybe start with Kelly. Are you seeing these kind of, asks for additional asset investments, whether it be portside activities, whether it be terminals, whether it be maybe not quite yet new ships, I don't know, you'll tell us, but is that something that we are very aware of here in the region but doesn't happen elsewhere, or you see a very similar trend, and where do you see it, if at all?
Well, I echo, I'm so honored to be here and am excited about this conversation. And Nick, the question is so timely because from the cruising side, so ocean cruising and river cruising actually has very long lead time. So whether you're building a port or a terminal or building a new ship, these are decisions that are being made 10 years ago. So when we experienced COVID, which obviously hit the industry very hard, you are already seeing investment that is continuing to this moment now. So we really I think we'll have 20 new ships debut over the next 2 years, 70 new ships. And the ships are a variety. From a product standpoint, you have very small luxury ships and expedition ships. You have mid-sized ship, you have mass market ships. 70 new ships will come out over the next 5 years. And you have world-class terminals where you see ports being developed to be as sophisticated as some of the best airports you've seen in the world. So the investment is continuing in part because the demand for cruising is so strong.
And are the ships that were ordered pre-COVID and that, I'm not sure what you say, delivered or come off the wharf now after COVID, are they still fit for purpose, or has there been a change in what the industry is looking for? So is it matching, or is there a lot of demand for something that is in shortage and maybe not so much demand for overcapacity in another part? How does that play out?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think the leadership of the cruise industry, again, in some of these situations where they had to make multi-billion-dollar decisions 10 years ago, are delivering the ships the passengers want today. And what's in production and what will come out over the next 5 years will be the ships that the next set of consumers are interested in. So the largest growing segment, the people most interested in taking a cruise vacation, are millennials and Gen Z. And so as that community becomes and uses their purchasing power for environmental and sustainability products, the ships that are coming out today are more technologically advanced than most modes of transportation you can see, and the newer ones, even still already, you'll see next year the adoption of hydrogen completely. Even the ability to use LNG now, which exists now, or batteries now, is because of these back investments. So long answer short is yes, you'll see that we match now and we'll match in the future.
And my kids would like to know free Wi-Fi in every room?
Say it again.
Free Wi-Fi in every room? Or in every
Well,
cabin?
there is Wi-Fi in every
All right,
room.
fair enough, fair enough. It's an investment after all. Perfect.
Maybe let's move to the next question. Digital in tourism. This is a hot topic across all sectors, but as well in tourism. But tourism is an experiential offering. You need to look and feel and live it. At the same time, digital is making strong inroads into the sector. So maybe Hazem, from your experience, how you're balancing between the digital side and the experiential side, and what investment opportunities digital is creating in the sector?
Well, thank you, Marwan. Thank you, Nick, and hello to my fellow panelists and to everyone here. Before answering the question, I think the role of digital in the sector could be looked at with different lenses. And before talking about those, I'd like to remind everyone here that the fact that in Saudi Arabia, we're probably the last global player coming and participating in this competitive landscape globally for the international visitor and also for the domestic visitor. Having an opportunity not to inherit anything while everyone globally is talking about digitalization, about switching from analog to digital, about deploying the role of technology across the visitor journey. We are native, and some of the choices that we are making is not only digital first, but sometimes digital only. Another thing that I'd like to highlight before addressing your question is the fact that we are in this industry of delighting consumers, delighting visitors. At the end of the day, the ultimate purpose is to leave people with beautiful memories, beautiful stories to tell, and for that, we need to deliver the full, comprehensive, holistic experience that is going to enable us to reach that objective. Now, digitally, first of all, as we build our activities across the value chain, I think digital has a big role when it comes to the visitors themselves. Being able, when a visitor starts building awareness, starts learning about a destination, we are very active in that realm. Saudi Arabia not being a known destination or a top-of-mind destination holistically for visitors, we are investing a lot of brand building in different channels, across social media, across different media channels to build awareness of Saudi, the things to do, the different packages, experiences that you do in our different beautiful destinations. When we launched, to Badr's point, when we started this journey back in 2019, quarter four, when we launched the e-visa for the first time in Saudi's history, it was an electronic visa where someone behind a digital device can apply. Within 5 to 10 minutes, they get their visa. Information gathering, transacting, buying your hotel, your airline, your packages is all available digitally, working with our trade partners. And even after the visitors reach here in Saudi Arabia, as they navigate different places, wayfinding, information gathering, booking, and even getting some surprises here and there that we push to the visitors is something that we do. Looking at digital also from a commercial perspective, we don't only stimulate demand in the Saudi Tourism Authority, but we also facilitate and orchestrate the commercial activity across the value chain. Being able to work with different parts of trade, such as destination management companies, tour operators, online tour agencies, we're working with them very closely to enable the availability of inventory across all these things digitally, so that a booker somewhere in the world, in Germany, in Japan, in China, in India, is able to assemble different parts of the package and meet the needs of their target audience. Lastly, I think digital plays a big role in running our organizations, enabling data-driven decision-making, being able to see those insights. As we said, this is a customer-focused, customer-centric sector. So those who are able to understand, know the drivers, the barriers, the needs of their target segments are the ones that are eventually going to win. So being able to deploy technology in gathering all these insights and supporting better decision making that is surgical, that is more hyper customized, hyper personalized, would enable us to actually deliver an authentic experience. We say that Saudi is going to be the home of the authentic Arabian experience, and being able to marry all those digital aspects with the human interaction, the very unique human interaction that we believe we can deliver for all our visitors, is our unique value proposition that will enable us to compete and achieve the big ambitions in the longer term, 2030 and beyond.
But maybe taking it from the national level to the operator level, right? Because Marlos, you have to do your digital transformation in parallel in your properties in Saudi, in Jordan, in Georgia, in Morocco, are you seeing a lot of different type of digital investment that you need to do in your different locations, or is it pretty much similar and just challenging normally?
I would say it's pretty much different everywhere. Everybody's kind of talking about the same idea. But the more I listen to it, and the more what you just said out when it comes to strategy, and our industries are quite similar. It's almost every country is creating waves, and as the operator, we're almost the surfer. That the higher the waves, the better you can surf. The lower the waves, there's no surfing to do. So from an operator perspective, what we've learned is where before we were kind of the leaders in technology, the leaders in innovation, the leaders in whatever we wanted. It's actually now the countries. It's through a lot of institutions that is being led. And so what we're building, and that's also very similar to Saudi Arabia, when we started building our company, we could build on innovation. We didn't have to look at all the history and trying to change something. So from the beginning, we never said, these are the systems you have to use. This is what you have to do. We built middleware, and every single country we go into, we can just plug in. The more innovative you go, the more we can plug that in. And there's certain countries that can't afford or are not that far or anything else. And when it comes to people often say, what about the digital check-in? Why can I not check in and then walk through? Security and safety in the GCC still plays a major role. But when you look at the conversations here and surrounding countries, right, if that's for the UAE, they're taking it as far as airports. It's not how can we make the technology work, it's how can we scan your face and how can we make sure that everything we're doing at the moment can plug into what we're already doing as operators. We're probably in Western Europe, we're still talking about how can we integrate everything, how can we have the scanner that is mobile. So unless as an operating company you actually build up agile, flexible, or anything else, I think we'll really be struggling in the future because the expectations definitely here, UAE not being any different, Egypt catching up, Mediterranean Europe catching up. The expectation from companies and organizations is much greater than I think where we challenge ourselves.
Is it the same in the cruising area? I mean, I know you represent a global membership basically, but you are still very much coming out of the analog age and had to do that transformation, whereas the SDA and Curtin are digital natives. Does that create different challenges?
I'd like to say that's a myth.
It's a myth. All right.
Where we might still be back is that we are leaders in innovation, and where, what's always interesting about tourism is how much of tourism actually relates to national security and the crossing of borders and the intersection. And so from the cruise perspective, because it is international commerce and because there's such a reliance and a dependency on the national security apparatus, cruise ships are some of the most advanced in terms of biometrics and facial recognition. It's how you're embarking and disembarking ships. It's the wearable technology that lets you go into your room to order your food by the pool, to arrange your shoreside. And so really from an analog standpoint, we're really far beyond because of just the root cause of having to really understand national security, the ability to create inspiration through sometimes only digital platforms, and really then onboard the advances in the customer experience and how you use that data to continually improve the product.
So, point taken. Absolutely. Is that something better that is actually sometimes asked for as a separate project? I mean, I made the question maybe a little bit naive, but I mean, it's easy to come and say, I want to have an asset of any type, or maybe even operating, but are entities coming and saying, listen, I actually know properly well how to do the hospitality and hosting part of it, but I just need help to upskill, to reach an audience, so I need digital investment. Is that something that you see, that exists, that is possible?
Absolutely, it is possible, and we don't look at it as it's a separate project, but indeed it is embedded in one of the 3 priorities we're focusing on in our national tourism strategy: sustainability, seamless travel, and technology-infused tourism. So these 3 are, let's say, the underlying pillars of everything that we do. Of course, there is a certain supply that we have to build in order to cater for the number of tourists that we're trying to attract, but we are creating specific programs to make sure that we tackle the needs of different investors. So one of the examples, we created a private equity fund with Diraya Capital, purely focusing on technology.
Oh, cool.
And we are exploring other opportunities to do so, to enable. So that example is an example where we create a product that tailors for entrepreneurs and startups. We recognize that the majority of the existing hospitality offering needs an upgrade or refurbishment, and a lot of that will depend on, or will be based on, of course, furniture, paint, and technology. So, and the type of product that we'll be using needs to be flexible to cater for the demand of these operators and owners.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Badr. Another pressing topic is talent. There is a talent shortage post-COVID, not only in tourism, across many sectors. And maybe, Marlos, I'll start with you. You've been operating hotels in many regions across the globe, but at the same time, you were able to build local talent to operate these hotels. What's the secret recipe there?
Craziness. I think it's motivation, right? I think there's a couple of different aspects. And while we're talking about the future, I think there's 2 things here. One is we have a changed working audience at the moment. So if somebody can deal with 20 applications in a minute, having somebody do the same monotone job for 8 hours is really, it's a hard ask. Secondly, we've been talking about robots for ages, and when we were at the conferences 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was saying, no, we shouldn't have a robot, that's ridiculous. Yeah, but then we all complain that when we go to get a Starbucks coffee, the coffee doesn't taste the same every single time, it tastes different every single time, but we don't want a robot to make it. It's quite contradicting. I think where you really see talent development, and if that's here in the kingdom or abroad, when Uber started, we were all saying it can't be that an Uber driver drives either 2 hours or 20 hours. It can't be that they're not from one of these companies. It can't be, we cannot control cleanliness. There's so many aspects that we can't control. Today, I would say every single one of us, would you call a taxi or do you go Uber? Yeah, you know that you go there, right? So I think and that's what we're doing as a company. Yes, we're very lucky to find talent today, local and international, because we're quite a young company. We allow people to be themselves. We are not creating these kind of robotic and expecting people to say the same in every single country. Behaviors are different, cultures are different, and people kind of resonate with that. Having said that, if you look at somebody like Marriott or Hilton or Accor, or, if you're at a large scheme, everybody is developing talent. Everybody is doing the same kind of trainings. And I think in the future, there will be a very big difference between training people on where to put the cutlery and training people on who they are and what they stand for. And so probably we will be borrowing each other's staff over time. There is legislation coming in Europe today, and that's still very much in the beginning. I could employ somebody in Spain, and they could be working for us in different countries. The moment that you take that much further, and yes, legislation doesn't support that as much yet, but the moment that you allow more of that, we hire talent not by location, we hire talent for talent. And some of my team members have never ever met each other, but when you hear them speak, you think they're best friends. When you look at the generations to come, some of my cousins, they're 15, they play with others, they talk to others via the computer games they play. They have friends globally that they've never met, and for them that's normal. So we're building a workforce, and we're working on a workforce for, that is expecting something very different. And I think we can really build on from that.
So I've had the pleasure to stay in some of your hotels. I just want to probe a little bit more. I mean, you have, and I've been a few times, so I wasn't just lucky, but you have near fanatic guest servers, right? I mean, they are enthusiastic beyond what you would normally see in most of your competitors. Is that happening at selection and recruiting, or is that happening in training? Are people trying to steal these people for other organizations, or do they only operate well in an environment like yours? You've got to give us a little bit more of the secret sauce here, I think.
So, a couple of things. One, yes, we're hiring people for character, not by skill set. Number one. The skill sets we can really teach people, unless it's specialized functions. But for the rest, we really hire by character, out of industry, doesn't matter. Secondly, the training that we do normally starts week 5, 6, 7, 8. So the first couple of weeks are really for somebody to understand where they are. We're not pretty much dropping or dumping somebody into a meeting room. Third, we do not have training as a function that is separate, neither HR. So recruitment is done by operations, recruitment is done by the GM, recruitment is done by whomever needs within their division, not by somebody who's just selecting just to fill a role. The moment you have this, they're picking people they want to work with. And that's very different. If you're selecting somebody you want to see every day, or you're just selecting just because. Then the next piece is, do they function in another environment? It's very difficult for them to do the same. What is very hard for us is to teach people how to be themselves. People ask every single day, just tell me where you want me to move, what you want me to do, how often you want me to do, what you want me to say. And you have to be very consistent and persistent in repeating, go out there, speak, lead by example. And I still do this, right? The moment I'm on a project, and so my team, you're in the lobby, we have a shortage of back of house areas by choice. The moment that you don't have back of house areas, the moment that you don't have pretty offices, everybody has to be on project. And you're forcing the front facing, not the back facing.
So we're actually having a discussion around investments, but you're saying you're doing it with less back of the house surface, which costs. You've eliminated recruitment, or you've folded it into operations. Is there areas where you need to spend more, literally in investment, in order to maintain a happy and motivated workforce?
Yes. Team member facilities. Team member restaurants, team member activities, engagement, communications, brand. people like to be part of something that is growing and blowing today. And the more we give them and the more we let them be part of that, the more they feel connected. And I know that we always talk about, how many followers do you have on Instagram and let's take a picture. But people like to be part of something, and not just something that is a product, but people like to be part of a following, etc. And that's a much heavier investment. The other part is, because we have a lot of collaborations, the part of investment is training them in how to create collaborations, but also how to then monetize that, how to legalize that, how to build that into the infrastructure. And I would say that's really the key areas. But yes, we don't have as many layers because we don't have as many offices, we don't have as much space, and we still get it done.
And Kelly, you also had to, be careful that I don't get it wrong again, but I would assume a large part of your pre-COVID workforce returned to their home ports, and basically it was not much work, and you had to recollect them as an industry, reconstitute them. Is recruiting, has it changed? Is the investment in acquisition changed? How, if at all?
Yeah, so cruising is interesting, and it's particularly interesting in the context of tourism because you have to think about it in three parts. There's the ship as transport, there are the hotel operations that are hospitality, and then there's the connection to shore and destinations and the experience that you're either facilitating for the guest, you're engaging the local communities, and then throughout it all is the crew who really becomes like family. So cruisers love to cruise, and they will return to cruising in part because of the affinity they have for the crew that they've met during their journey and for the people they've met in the local communities. And so cruising is really one of the places where they're hiring for character in the jobs that are non-technical. They're hiring for skill in the areas that are technical, but it's the connecting of people to people and people to places that is the following. It's the movement that attracts people to cruise. It's why the retention rates are so high for the crew and why it's so important to the customer experience that there is deep engagement, that you're hiring locals to help support the visit in the destination, that you're procuring products and services and goods from the region. And so it really is an entire ecosystem that does involve training to the degree that you can be an expert facilitator of an experience. And so there was, obviously the industry had voluntarily suspended operations for a significant amount of time, and there are great numbers of crew that come from more than 200 countries. Everyone is working to come back to work, and one of the ways that cruise is different than airlines, for example, is they will not operate an itinerary if they can't deliver on the service that they've set expectations for.
But I'm really curious about this one, more for us personal curiosity. So we hear war of talent, silent quitting, not enough. It sounds like we don't have too many of the issues here, but do you foresee that you will need, on average, to pay your associates or your colleagues or your crews more, or is it still going to be retention through this engagement that you talked about, Marlos, or that loyalty in coming back to lifestyle? But I'm really curious, will we need to pay our tourism workers more because there's less of them in the X years to come?
I'll go first and say that I think you did some excellent statistics in the opening where 1 out of every 10 people in the world are going to be a tourism worker. And so I think that some of the challenges we've talked about before, Nick, is how do we attract young people into these professions, and what is the trade-off between the experience that you'll have and the pay that you'll earn. And so I think some of the challenges are at the very front of the food chain, so to speak, because I think tourism is a terrific profession. It obviously touches every part of a community, and the pandemic showed us just how much tourism is the fabric of your own neighborhood, not just a faraway destination. So it's from a cruise standpoint, we always look at the human potential. Are you able to feed your family, send them to good schools, have access to good medical care? And I think because what we offer is so experiential, it's never going to be the place where you're going to make a lot of money, but you will have you'll have such a rich satisfaction, and that's why, again, the retention rates are so high. But I think in the hospitality and hotel industry, it's very different. So I can't wait to hear your answer.
Yeah, I think it's going to be balance. I think it's not across the board. So people want to have not just a life, but when you talk about experiences, when you work 6 days a week, 20 hours a day, that's not necessarily an experience. And so some people in that will have a great experience and some won't. And I think where before we used to pay really bad and in entry-level positions and expected the 20 hours, the always, the kind of, and not giving people an identity. And I think there's trade-offs. So we will have to pay certain levels or certain hours or certain shifts much better to make that absolutely more attractive.
It's almost like surge payment on Kareem or
yes,
Uber.
absolutely.
Yeah,
so
I love
nights, weekends, it could be during very busy times.
My boss is in the room here somewhere. Maybe I'm going to suggest a surge payment on high intensity as well.
That's now kind of right.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there is the part of giving people the opportunity to be themselves.
Yeah.
And giving them a position within the organization, create that entire connection that they're actually part of something. I think there is a lot to say for being equal, and that could go as far as having a much more streamlined uniforms instead of making a great differentiation factors. There's a lot of human elements, I think, today that is important to people that as an industry, we've always done like that, and we don't even think about what we do to people at times. And I think more than just paying a lot, I think we have to be more flexible. And if somebody can work 3 days and you have 3 people that can work 3 days, it fulfills the whole thing too, right? And there comes in the changing of visa legislation, passport legislation, short-term working, anything else around that.
I know this is a topic you're particularly passionate about, but
I have a couple of points since we're talking about human capital and talent in the sector. I think from a government perspective, there are 2 roles for this. One, the role of dealing with an economic challenge with all governments, which is unemployment. Since tourism historically had 1 of 10 jobs, statistics pre-pandemic says that every 5 new job created, 1 of those is in tourism. So 20% for future jobs that are being created is in tourism. And I think there is a role for government institutions together with academia and TVTZ type of institutions to upskill people and guide them towards filling that unemployment gap in the sector. Secondly, I truly believe that, and as I said before, the differentiated value proposition of national destinations. In our recipe, I think the human capital dimension, interaction, is an integral part of that recipe. When we promote for Saudi as a destination to enjoy tourism, interacting with the Saudis is part of that, with its own flavor, with its own culture. We have a concept of Saudi Hafawa that we've talked about in different occasions, which is the true spirit of Saudi hospitality. It's about excellence, it's about generosity, it's about truly welcoming people in the country, interacting with them as if you're welcoming them into your own home. In Saudi, this is important, and I think it is also part of any offering across the whole tourism experience.
Great. Let's move to sustainability. Sustainability has been is a hot topic across sectors, and it's gaining momentum in the sector, in tourism sector. How do you see sustainability shaping the future of tourism? And maybe Kelly, maybe I'll start with you. I know you're the ambassador of sustainable tourism at the United Nations World Tourism Organization. So if you can give us your perspective on that, please.
Sure. You know, just to pick up on your point a little bit, I think the world of tourism works best when the public and the private sectors work together. And there are times when governments push and private sector follows, and there's times when the private sector leads and government supports. And so from a sustainability standpoint, it's really to define sustainability. So whether it's environmental sustainability and what that has to do with climate, and that's where maybe decarbonization fits in, or where does it have to do with environment and where does, you know, a circular economy fit in. It's just ripe with so much opportunity. And again, one of the reasons I'm so proud to work with the cruise industry is because, again, it's the leadership that existed a decade ago before this was really the topic du jour, that you know, billions of dollars were invested to develop technologies that make that ship as transport have a smaller carbon footprint. Again, there's ships today with LNG, which is obviously a transitional, sustainable fuel, on our way to much more, and we'll let governments help guide this, but where you're going to see propulsion happening in a different way. And at the same time, that hospitality, the hotel operations in some of these large ships that are in fact like a floating city, what they've already developed is greater recycling habits than almost any other city. And so how waste is processed, how, you know, some of the things that, again, this is why I have to do so much myth busting, Nick, is this perception that somehow cruise ships, maybe 40 years ago, were not great actors, but now there really is a focus on climate and decarbonization, sustainability, and a circular economy, and the important part that people play in it. So, you know, you can see from our commitments to be net carbon zero by 2050, which is incredibly ambitious because unlike aviation, which is a massive industry, cruise is a speck. You know, we're 1% of all of the maritime. And so working in partnerships with governments to be able to fund the kind of R&D that's necessary to really continue to lead the way in sustainable efforts is where we've put a lot of energy as an association representing the suppliers, representing the cruise operators and representing the travel agents to make sure that we have a common lexicon and that we're letting governments know what work is being done and where governments can help support advance a sustainability agenda in a way that supports a tourism agenda. Because nothing would be worse than some of the conversations that we've heard where people are now discouraging people from traveling. And so coming out of COVID, I think we realized that it is the human experience where you need to be connected to people in a way that travel and tourism promotes. And so all of us have a job to do to really talk about how not only are we sustainable and building for a more sustainable future, but just how important it is to peace and connectivity to be able to travel in responsible ways.
Better, I'd really love to hear your opinion or your insights on this, because you are a very interesting vehicle. You are, on one side, you have KPIs that are very much financial, so you're not a charity, right? You would like to get most of your money back and you would like to get a yield, but at the same time, you also have a development mandate that says, well, maybe not all my impact needs to be financial, but could also be different. In what you see in your projects that you're working right now, is that balancing reasonably easy, or is it a trade-off constantly?
No, it's not a trade-off at all. And again, sustainability is hard-coded in our strategy. Every single project that comes at TDF's basket, there's an assessment that's being done on how it's not only sustainability, it's the entire ESG landscape. But we believe that that's not enough. We are updating or developing a new ESG strategy as we speak. We believe that it's what the tourists want. So I believe, and forgive me, I forgot the source, but about 40% of tourists are willing to pay more for more sustainable destinations, whether it's hotels or otherwise. So it is what tourists and future tourists are increasingly wanting. Secondly, it has proved companies that abide by ESG, and the pandemic is a great proof of that, are more resilient and they're more protected, and that's great for us as a lender, or if we're an equity partner or a guarantor. It provides more resiliency and more protection for our investments. So it just makes sense from, of course, the most important part is protecting the environment and protecting the assets that we are leveraging to attract the tourists in the first place, but it also makes a business sense, and it's more attractive to the customers that we are trying to attract.
Wonderful. Seeing slowly but surely we're coming to the end of our session, and if we can summarize, Marwan, I'm also curious to see what you have heard. What I have heard from our panelists is many things that maybe pre-COVID were marketing topics around sustainability, around war for talent, etc., are now front and center of the agenda as strategic topics of, get it or don't play in the game anymore, right? And those that are in the business of promoting, financing, developing the destination say, guys, if you want to come play in our playground, then we expect you to have that front and center as well. Sounds like everybody had a rather interesting period of COVID. Must have been not very relaxing, but you've all not changed industries. Our people seem to have changed industries less than we had perhaps feared as well, although we do read a lot about, the great quit and, moving into call centers, etc. And lastly, I hear a lot of positivism combined with saying we got a fair amount of work ahead of us. So this is not a less attractive industry, may become a more profitable industry. It's not anytime soon going to become a 9-to-5 industry, but I like the surge pricing. I'm going to think about this one. And it looks like we may have really fantastic success stories from the kingdom and otherwise to report next year, same place, same time. Marwan, have we summarized it well?
You captured it well. Great.
Awesome.
And pleasure to have you. Thank you for flying in, some of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
you'd like to thank our panel, thank you for coming today.